Hello everyone, John AG here. Welcome back to my channel AUREX. If you haven't yet, subscribe to my channel. In this channel, you will find the real information, real market updates that everyone cannot tell you. So please subscribe to this channel and love you all of my subscribers for your support. And please, watch this video till the very end because YouTube will not push my videos to more people, and we need to add many things related to this topic. The algorithms do not want you to hear what I am about to say. The financial elite would rather keep you comfortably distracted while the foundations of your wealth are systematically dismantled. But I refuse to let you walk into this storm blind. We are building an impenetrable community here, an alliance of awake, prepared individuals who refuse to be collateral damage in a game rigged by central bankers and politicians. Imagine waking up, pouring your morning coffee, and realizing that the blood flowing through the veins of the global economy just stopped. That is exactly what has happened today, Monday, May 11th, 2026. I want you to burn this exact date into your memory. I want you to remember the chair you are sitting in, the screen you are looking at, and the heavy electric feeling in the air. We are not experiencing a mere market correction. We are not watching a standard cyclical recession unfold. What we are witnessing is the catastrophic, synchronized failure of the sovereign debt market colliding with a terrifying geopolitical inferno. The unthinkable has manifested into our daily reality. The Federal Reserve has officially halted U.S. Treasury Bond auctions. The United States Treasury market, long touted as the deepest, most liquid, and absolutely safest financial sanctuary on the planet, has been frozen solid. And concurrently, as if designed by a cruel architect of chaos, the escalating war with Iran has choked off the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices into the stratosphere and igniting a historic, panic-driven flight to safety. Physical gold has just violently shattered the $4,600 mark. Let that sink in. Let the sheer mathematical gravity of that number wash over you. But here is the detail that Wall Street is absolutely terrified you will figure out. This is not about gold going up. This is about the absolute collapse of the paper illusions you have been forced to trust. To grasp the magnitude of a frozen bond market, you have to peer beneath the sanitized surface of mainstream finance and look at the actual plumbing of the global economy. For the last 8 decades, the United States 10-year Treasury note has not just been an investment vehicle. It has been the gravitational center of the entire financial universe. It is the metric universally known as the risk-free return. Every single asset on planet Earth, your home mortgage, your auto loan, the interest rate on your credit card, the valuation of massive technology conglomerates, the solvency of your grandfather's pension fund, is intricately tethered to the yield on U.S. government debt. It is the baseline reality of money. So, I ask you with the utmost seriousness, what happens to reality when that baseline shatters? For years, right here on AUREX, we have been meticulously tracking the warning signs. We did not need a crystal ball, we just needed a calculator and the courage to look at the math. We watched the government run completely unhinged deficits, borrowing $2, $3, sometimes $4 trillion a year just to keep the lights on. We watched with mounting dread as the interest expense on the national debt eclipsed the entire defense budget, surpassed Medicare, and became the single largest line item in the federal budget. The Treasury has been relentlessly flooding the global market with paper IOUs, essentially begging foreign nations and domestic institutions to fund an empire that the American tax base could no longer sustainably afford. It was a Ponzi scheme dressed up in a tailored suit of macroeconomic theory, and today, the music finally stopped playing. When a sovereign bond auction fails, it means the government threw a multi-billion-dollar debt offering, and the buyers, the primary dealers, the massive foreign central banks, the institutional whales, simply folded their arms and refused to participate. They stared at the yields being offered. They calculated the rampant, sticky inflation silently eroding their purchasing power, and they collectively declared, "No more. We will not finance our own destruction. We will not fund your collapse." This is a sovereign margin call. Faced with this unprecedented humiliation and systemic failure, the Federal Reserve had only 2 choices, both of them absolutely catastrophic. They could have let the free market dictate interest rates, allowing yields to spike to 10, 15, or even 20% to entice buyers back to the table. But doing so would instantly bankrupt the U.S. government, detonate the housing market overnight, and plunge the globe into a depression that would make the 1930s look like a minor economic hiccup. Their other choice was to halt the market entirely, to step in, hit the panic button, suspend the public auctions to hide the humiliating lack of demand, and simply print trillions of digital dollars out of thin air to buy the debt themselves. Today, they chose the dark path of monetization. By freezing the market, they hit pause on reality. They are attempting to conceal the terrifying fact that the emperor has absolutely no clothes. They are broadcasting to every financial capital in the world that the US dollar is no longer backed by the economic output of a productive nation, but solely by a central bank printing press running at terminal, desperate velocity. The smart money, the institutional giants, they already know this. The illusion of the risk-free asset is dead and buried. You cannot print your way out of a mathematical debt spiral, and the ledger has finally caught fire. The contagion effect of this freeze will be felt in every bank, every corporate payroll department, and every kitchen table across the world. When the benchmark for lending breaks, credit freezes. When credit freezes, businesses cannot make payroll, ships cannot get letters of credit to move cargo, and the very machinery of modern civilization begins to grind to a terrifying, screeching halt. But financial systems, no matter how over-leveraged and fragile, rarely collapse in a perfect vacuum. They require a catalyst. They need a spark to ignite the mountain of highly combustible debt. And that spark has erupted with biblical violence in the Middle East. The war with Iran has escalated so rapidly and so viciously that it has blown past even the most pessimistic wargaming scenarios from the Pentagon. We are long past the era of proxy skirmishes, measured diplomatic posturing, or empty geopolitical saber-rattling. We are dealing with direct, kinetic, state-on-state military strikes that have effectively barricaded the Strait of Hormuz. If you want to understand the economic gravity of this conflict, you must look at a map and understand the geography of global energy. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a body of water. It is the vital jugular vein of the global industrial machine. Roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply, tens of millions of barrels every single day, must flow through that narrow, highly vulnerable geographic choke point. With commercial maritime traffic currently at a dead, terrifying standstill, with massive supertankers burning on the water, turning back to port, or simply unable to secure maritime insurance at any price, the cost of crude oil has become completely unmoored from reality. We are staring down the barrel of sustained prices well north of $130, perhaps violently pushing toward $160 or $200 a barrel if this military blockade persists for even a few more weeks. I need you to understand that this is not just about the pain you will feel filling up your car at the gas pump. That is the least of our worries. This is an inflationary tsunami that will wash over and drown every single sector of the global economy. Oil is the master resource. It is the foundational molecule of modern human existence. It is deeply embedded in the nitrogen fertilizers required to grow the food on your plate. It is synthesized into the plastics used in life-saving hospital equipment and everyday consumer goods. It is the diesel fuel that powers the massive, interconnected logistical fleets of trains, cargo ships, and 18-wheelers, delivering critical supplies to your local supermarket. When the baseline cost of energy doubles, the cost of human existence doubles. The price of everything you touch, eat, and use is about to explode upward, while the currency you use to buy it rapidly depreciates. And here lies the most terrifying, inescapable synergy between the kinetic war in the Middle East and the silent war in the bond market. How does a sovereign nation actually finance a massive, global, multi-theater conflict? They finance it with debt. But as we have just established, the U.S. bond market is fundamentally, structurally broken. The government desperately requires trillions of dollars to project military power, to secure vulnerable global supply lines, and to fund this escalating war, at the exact historical moment when the rest of the world is flatly, aggressively refusing to lend them a single cent. This leaves the Treasury and the Federal Reserve with only one mechanism left: raw, unadulterated, aggressive currency debasement. The government is actively weaponizing inflation. They are paying for bombs, aircraft carriers, and military logistics through the invisible, silent, devastating taxation of your savings account, your 401k, and your wages. Every time they print $1 billion to send a missile overseas, they are literally reaching into your pocket and stealing the purchasing power of the hours you worked to earn your money. When absolute trust in paper promises evaporates, and when the geopolitical world is quite literally on fire, humanity always, without fail, returns to the one true, immutable money. Today, physical gold shattered the $4,600 per ounce barrier, and frankly, looking at the macroeconomic data, it shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. Do not make the mistake of calling this a speculative rally. Do not let the financial talking heads on television convince you this is just a cyclical trade. This is a profound, historic financial evacuation. It is capital fleeing a burning building. For years, the mainstream financial media arrogantly mocked gold bugs. They sat in their air-conditioned studios and called gold a barbarous relic. They laughed at it as a pet rock that yields no interest, produces no quarterly earnings reports, and pays no corporate dividends. They aggressively conditioned you to trust the high-frequency trading algorithms, to put your blind faith in experimental central bank digital currencies, and to gleefully buy tech stocks trading at absurd, detached valuations of 80 times their forward earnings. But what happens when the digital grid is threatened? What happens when a targeted cyber attack, a catastrophic sovereign default, or an extended bank holiday completely wipes out your access to those digital digits on your screen? Gold is hitting $4,600 not necessarily because the yellow metal itself is mysteriously becoming intrinsically more valuable overnight, but because the fiat currencies of the world, the dollars, the euros, the yen, the pounds, are rapidly, visibly becoming worthless. Gold is the ultimate unflinching financial mirror. It is reflecting the dying purchasing power of the system we have been forced to live in. If you want to know the truth, stop listening to what the elites say and start watching what they do. Notice who has been aggressively, relentlessly buying physical gold over the last 5 to 10 years. It wasn't the retail investors day trading on their phones. It was the central banks themselves. The sovereign nations of China, Russia, India, Brazil, and even supposedly allied European nations have been quietly, methodically repatriating their gold reserves from foreign vaults and backing up the proverbial truck to buy thousands of tons more. They knew this exact day was coming. They ran the long-term macroeconomic models. They knew the Western debt load was mathematically, objectively unsustainable. And they knew that when the global geopolitical order inevitably fractured under the weight of its own hubris, the only asset with zero counterparty risk, the only financial instrument on earth that does not rely on a politician's promise to pay, is physical gold. At $4,600, the free market is screaming at the top of its lungs that the 70-year era of cheap fiat money, cheap abundant energy, and unquestioned American financial hegemony is definitively, irrevocably over. But I want to step away from the flashing red market tickers, the complex geopolitical strategies, and the macroeconomic charts for a moment. Because behind every single economic data point, behind every percentage drop in the bond yield, there is a human life. There is a family trying to survive. And this is where my heart breaks, and this is why I am speaking to you with such urgency today. The real, visceral tragedy of May 11th, 2026 isn't happening on the trading floors of Wall Street. The bankers will always find a way to bail themselves out. The tragedy is happening on Main Street, in kitchens, living rooms, and small businesses across the entire world. I started this AUREX channel because I saw the writing on the wall years ago, and I wanted to protect everyday people from the precise devastation we are watching unfold right now. Think about the elderly retiree who played by all the rules the system gave them, the man or woman who worked 40 grueling years, saved their money diligently, deferred their gratification, and put their life savings into a safe, conservative portfolio of government bonds, trusting the advice of their financial planner. Today, those bonds are frozen in time, their real-world value evaporating by the second against the onslaught of hyperinflation. Their fixed income pension, which looked so comfortable a decade ago, cannot possibly keep up with the soaring, unpredictable cost of basic food, life-saving medicine, and winter heating energy driven by the war in the Middle East. They are watching a lifetime of hard labor melt away like ice on a summer sidewalk. Think about the young, ambitious couple trying desperately to start a family and buy their first piece of property. The mortgage market is completely paralyzed today. Because the underlying Treasury market is broken, banks literally do not know how to price a 30-year loan. The American dream of home ownership, of having a small piece of land to call your own, is being violently replaced by a desperate, exhausting, month-to-month scramble just to afford the skyrocketing grocery bill. The psychological and emotional toll of severe, sustained inflation is profound, and it is devastating to the human spirit. It is an insidious disease that makes you feel like you are running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up, while your legs grow heavier and your lungs burn. You work harder, you put in more hours, you cut back on your spending, and yet, at the end of the month, you are somehow further behind than when you started. It breeds a deep, dark societal resentment. It completely destroys the social contract and annihilates the foundational trust citizens must have in their institutions to maintain a civilized society. When you finally realize, when it truly clicks in your mind, that the money you trade your precious, finite life energy for is being systematically, deliberately diluted by unelected bureaucrats to fund endless, senseless wars and to bail out bankrupt, corrupt banking systems, it permanently changes how you view the world. You feel betrayed. You feel angry. That is the emotional reality, the raw human element we are collectively facing right now. There is fear, there is deep uncertainty, and there is a gnawing, heavy anxiety in the pit of your stomach about what tomorrow might bring. I want to validate that fear right now. I want you to know that if you are feeling scared watching the news today, if you feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of these events, you are not crazy. You are simply paying attention. You are wide awake while the rest of the world is sleepwalking toward the cliff. But listen to me very carefully. We absolutely cannot let this fear paralyze us. Panic is a luxury we simply cannot afford right now. We must take this raw emotion, this fear and this anger, and we must channel it into cold, calculated, decisive action. To truly understand the historic magnitude of where we are going, we must look unflinchingly at where we have been. This is not the first time in human history that a massive global superpower has faced a catastrophic sovereign debt spiral compounded by immense military overextension. History does not always repeat itself exactly, but it has a terrifying tendency to rhyme. Look back to the mighty Roman Empire. Rome did not fall overnight in a single cinematic fiery battle. They collapsed slowly, then suddenly, because they began clipping their coins. They systematically reduced the silver content of the denarius to fund their massive, sprawling armies stationed across the known world, and to pay off unmanageable state debts. They experienced crippling, multi-generational inflation that hollowed out their robust middle class, destroyed the economic core of their society, and left them vulnerable to collapse. Look at the haunting history of Weimar Germany in the 1920s. A proud, industrialized nation whose government arrogantly tried to print their way out of massive, unpayable war reparations. They believed they could outsmart the immutable laws of mathematics, physics, and economics. It ended with desperate citizens bringing literal wheelbarrows full of entirely worthless stamped paper cash just to buy a single stale loaf of bread. It ended with families burning stacks of currency in their living room fireplaces because the paper money was literally cheaper and more abundant than buying actual firewood. Look at the turbulent 1970s right here in the United States. We saw the punishing Arab oil embargoes, severe geopolitical tension in the Middle East, combined with the lingering, massive inflationary costs of the Vietnam War and a historic severing of the gold standard by Richard Nixon in 1971. We endured a miserable, grinding decade of stagflation, stagnant, lifeless economic growth, combined with runaway, double-digit inflation that crushed the working class. But what makes today, what makes May 2026 so historically unique and uniquely terrifying is the sheer unprecedented scale of the leverage. We are dealing with a hyper-financialized, hyper-connected global economy where trillions of dollars move at the speed of light. In the 1970s, the United States debt-to-GDP ratio was hovering around a very manageable 30%. Today, it has exploded well past 130%. We simply do not have the economic cushion, the margin of error that we once had. We cannot deploy the same tactics. The Federal Reserve cannot simply raise interest rates to 20%, like Chairman Paul Volcker heroically did in 1980 to slaughter inflation. Because raising rates to even a fraction of that level today would instantly, mathematically trigger a sovereign default of the United States government. They are trapped in a doom loop of their own creation, and the halting of the bond market today is the final, undeniable admission of that trap. This brings us to the ultimate, inescapable geopolitical consequence of today's events: the rapid, violent acceleration of global de-dollarization and the massive shifting of the world's economic tectonic plates. For 80 long years, since the ashes of World War II and the forging of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the US dollar has enjoyed the unparalleled, exorbitant privilege of being the world's undisputed reserve currency. This gave America a superpower. It meant we could simply print paper, and the rest of the world would happily labor to exchange real, tangible goods, televisions, automobiles, electronics, raw materials, and oil for that printed paper. The absolute, unshakable foundation of this modern financial system was the petrodollar agreement forged in the 1970s, where Saudi Arabia and OPEC agreed to price their vital energy exports exclusively in US dollars in exchange for American military protection. The raging war in Iran, the chaos burning across the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, and the complete fracturing of historic Middle Eastern alliances have effectively severed that petrodollar agreement forever. The rest of the world is watching closely. They are watching the United States weaponize its currency, slap crippling financial sanctions on its enemies, and now spectacularly fail to even maintain a functioning domestic bond market to fund its own basic operations. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, alongside dozens of their new resource-rich strategic partners, are not sitting idly by waiting for the Western financial system to miraculously repair itself. They have been aggressively, quietly, building alternative, non-dollar sovereign payment systems. They have been hoarding the very physical gold that is now surging past $4,600 an ounce. They are actively, deliberately positioning themselves to dominate a post-dollar, multipolar world where commodities and hard assets, not paper promises, dictate true global power. The halting of the Treasury auctions today is the giant neon sign flashing to the entire globe that the old financial system is officially closed for repairs, and it will absolutely never open again in its current form. So what do? Where does that leave you, the dedicated viewer of AUREX, who has had the courage to stay with me through this intense, necessary deep dive? You must fundamentally, immediately, and permanently shift your entire understanding of what wealth actually is. If you believe wealth is a digit on a banking app screen, you are going to lose everything. A bank account is nothing more than a ledger entry. It is an IOU, an unsecured promise from a highly leveraged institution that is backed by a government that is, as of today, actively failing to sell its own debt to the market. That is not wealth, that is counterparty risk. Real wealth is tangible. Real wealth is physical. It is gold and silver, the only pure monies that have successfully survived every single currency collapse, hyperinflationary event, world war, and famine in over 5,000 years of recorded human history. Real wealth is productive land, agricultural real estate that cannot be printed by a desperate central banker. Real wealth is energy and essential commodities, the absolute foundational building blocks of modern civilization that will always have demand. Real wealth is food security, the profound ability to sustain yourself and your family completely independent of fragile, just-in-time corporate supply chains that are currently breaking down globally. Most importantly, real wealth is your own human capital, the specific, irreplaceable, valuable skills you possess that cannot be outsourced to another country, automated by an algorithm, or digitized away in a crisis. If you have your entire life savings trapped in fiat illusions, in paper assets tied to a dying system, you need to think critically and act swiftly. You need to look at how to legally, safely, and intelligently move a portion of your labor into hard assets that exist outside the banking system. I am a narrator of markets, a student of financial history, and the story today is shouting at us through a megaphone. Get off the tracks before the runaway train of currency debasement runs you over. Furthermore, you must recognize that you cannot survive this transition alone. You must build your local community. In times of profound economic dislocation and terrifying geopolitical war, your absolute strongest asset is not just the gold coins buried in your safe. It is the resilient people around you. The localized economy, your trusted neighbors, your local farmers, and your community network will become your vital, life-saving lifeline as the massive globalized supply chains continue to fracture and fail under the unbearable, crushing weight of kinetic conflict and systemic inflation. We are officially entering a period of immense, unprecedented historical volatility. There will be chaotic days ahead where the stock market might aggressively rally based on false hopes, empty political promises, or massive, desperate central bank liquidity injections. Do not be fooled by the dead cat bounces. Do not let the media lull you back to sleep. The structural integrity of the global debt market has been irreparably compromised today, and the math cannot be reversed. I know this is a heavy, dark, and frightening message to absorb. It is not the light, entertaining news anyone wants to hear. But as I promised you on day one when I started the AUREX channel, here we deal in harsh reality, not comfortable, dangerous fantasy. We intentionally stare directly into the shadows, so we are prepared and armed when the monsters finally step out into the light. The historic surge to $4,600 gold is a blaring, deafening wake-up call to humanity. The halted Treasury Bond auctions are the final alarm bells ringing in the halls of global power. The war in the Middle East is the Category 5 hurricane making direct landfall on our economic shores. But listen to my voice. You still have agency. You have the power to protect your family. You have the power to preserve your hard-earned purchasing power, to completely insulate your wealth, and to navigate your loved ones safely through this historic storm. But you must act with clear intention. You must act with deep education, and you must act right now before the exits become too crowded. Please, if you found value in this video, if my words have opened your eyes to the profound reality of what is truly happening behind the sanitized, corporate mainstream headlines, share this video everywhere you possibly can. Send it to your family, text it to your friends, email it to your coworkers. YouTube's algorithms actively, aggressively suppress this kind of hard, unvarnished financial truth because they want you watching mindless distractions, not understanding the exact mechanical process of how your currency and your future are being destroyed. Hit the like button to help fight that suppression. Subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below and tell me what you are seeing. What are the prices doing in your local grocery stores? What are the fears keeping you up at night? What are your specific preparation strategies for this new world of 2026? Let's communicate. Let's build a powerful, decentralized community of awake, hyper-prepared, and totally resilient individuals who will survive and thrive through this great reset. Thank you for watching till the very end. I love you all, my subscribers, for your unwavering support and courage in these dark, unprecedented times. Stay incredibly strong, stay constantly vigilant, relentlessly protect your families, and I will see you in the next critical market update. John AG, signing off.